Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to At Black Psychiatry. It's me, your content creator, your information giver, all of those things, the founder of At Black Psychiatry. It's me. I'm back. It's a doctor named Danny, Dr. Hairston, all of those things. So welcome back. Thank you all for joining us. Did you miss us? Because we were not here in September, but we are back and ready. I know that traditionally September is Suicide Prevention Month, and they like to talk about that in September, but it's really a topic that we need to discuss all the time, especially in our community when people are hesitant to discuss it, when people, are a little wary, and there's a trigger warning here. Just know that it is something that we understand everyone is not comfortable with, but it's something that we deal with. Contrary to popular belief, suicide does not just happen in white people and white families and white communities. It's not just a white thing. And here at Black Psychiatry, we get into the real, we talk about things, we have frank discussion. So we are going to get into it. And thank you for being here with us for this important topic. And if you know anything about me, you know that my approach to suicide prevention is much farther than calling a number and a crisis number. It's about when people need help early on and what do they need to fulfill their basic needs so they don't get to that point, or so that we help them. So I am here again with some great experts. I don't know how I do it, how I get them to come and agree to do this, to provide this content to y'all free of charge all the time, but yet somehow they are here again. So I appreciate us all doing it for the community and for having them back. So we do have in the building, in the virtual building, we do have some OGs. We have Amber Thornton, who is an advocate, who is here in the community. She's the CEO of her own LLC dedicated to digital media and mindfulness. So Amber is back. Thank you for being here with us again, Amber. And another OG who you all know and love, because you tell me that you love him. We have Dr. Daryl Shorter, who's an addiction psychiatrist in Houston, who is now at Menninger. And he is also the Addiction Psychiatry Fellowship Director. He reminds me, he still is that over there at Baylor. So welcome to our OGs in Black Psychiatry. And then also welcome to our newcomers. So we have Lita, and she is representing My Natural Me. You can also find her on YouTube. So after you watch this YouTube, just go ahead, skip over to the next one, My Natural Me, for her mental health advocacy. And we have Miss Leslie from Brown Girls Embrace. And I am here for Miss Leslie, of course, because she is also here in the DMV with me to bring you all the resources. She is a self-love coach, which we all need some self-love. So maybe she's going to give us some tips, because I need some self-love and I need a break. So we are going to get into our topics here. Just remember that we have a sponsor in the Department of Behavioral Health in DC. And if you need any services, if you happen to be a healthcare worker in DC or a resident of DC or just a healthcare worker, period, please email us at the Howard RR Project at Gmail. And of course, Howard University is the institution that pays me, and also the one that's going to provide you services. So email the Howard RR Project. Thank you to all of you who have filled out surveys for us to keep us here. We have been renewed for funding, so we are excited about that. Yes, surprise. So we can keep bringing you free services if you are a healthcare worker, period, or if you are a Washington, D.C. resident. So Howard RR Project, I'll put that back up later. So we're going to get into it. We're going to have a frank discussion. It's going to be real. I need you all to send your questions. We'll put them here in the chat for you. Anything you want to ask our panelists, please ask them. And I am going to hand it over to our host, moderator, expert extraordinaire, Dr. Daryl Shorter.
Thank you, Dr. Danny Hairston. And I'm really honored to be here with this group of panelists this evening. Thank you for allowing me to guide us through this really important conversation about suicide and suicide prevention. I think we should just dive right in because we have a lot to talk about as it relates to the Black community and suicide. And I want to echo Danny's earlier trigger warning that some of the things that we talk about this evening may be a bit troubling, particularly if you are a family member or a friend of someone who might have died by suicide or have struggled with that yourself. So please avail yourself of the resources that we will be talking about this evening, and let's just go from there. So with that, I'll open it up to our panelists. How do you know when someone might be suicidal? Let's talk about warning signs first, and I'll open with Miss Amber. How do you know when someone might be suicidal?
In my experience, coming from a background of case management and really handling caseloads of 35 plus for a majority Black individuals, African American individuals, I've seen things like withdrawal, isolation, um, not really taking care of themselves, not really understanding what they're feeling. So being very kind of confused about what's going on with them, or not really having the proper verbiage for what they're feeling. So a lot of the times I've run into situations where they're just kind of like, I don't know what this is. I just know that I haven't been wanting to go out with my friends, or I haven't really been attending family events. I've been stuck in my room. I keep the lights off, that sort of thing. I don't shower, or, what have you. A lot of those normal day-to-day, daily things that we do to take care of ourselves. I've noticed that that is a huge sign when it comes to anything that has to do with suicidal ideation or that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about decreasing ability to sort of care for oneself. We're hearing about people changing their behaviors, perhaps, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And also not being able to necessarily find language for describing their emotional experience of things. Thank you, Amber. Ms. Lita, can we bring you in on the conversation?
Sure,
What should
absolutely.
we be looking for?
Right. So I've also noticed the way they start describing how they're feeling can change. So, for example, I've seen many times where they actually start saying things like, "I feel like giving up," or things like, "I just can't take it anymore." Those are also very strong words that can be easily overlooked. But that is definitely a warning sign. When someone starts talking and showing that they appear to be hopeless, that they feel like giving up, they just can't seem to go on. When they start saying those things, we definitely want to pay attention to that. And then the other thing is anger, and we may talk more about that later, but when we start seeing people that they seem to be angry all the time, and they seem to be, what one might consider acting out in anger, those can also be signs that something is going on more than just what we see at the surface.
Okay, I'm gonna make this a little bit more complicated for you, Leslie, Miss Leslie, because I want you to piggyback on something that Miss Lita talked about, which is related to anger and maybe some of the other emotions that people experience and express that might tip you off that someone is maybe struggling with suicidal thoughts or feeling suicidal.
Yes, from my personal experience of losing my father to suicide at the age of 9, I noticed my family said that he was embarrassed and he was ashamed a lot about his life, and he began to have these depressing feelings. So he didn't seek the help that he needed to get because he was embarrassed, or maybe he just didn't go. But anger and depression, anger and feeling ashamed of yourself and being ashamed of where you are in life can affect you too.
Thank you, Miss Leslie. Anger is something that everybody kind of talked on or touched on, and I want to make sure that we contextualize anger for people, because we all get angry. And so what is the kind of anger that someone experiences that might tip you off that something else may be going on? I mean, I'm a big Solange fan, and she had an album where, yeah, I'm getting the nods. She has a song called "Mad." You got a lot to be mad about. And I think as Black people, we got a lot to be mad about. And so how do we parse out the stuff that we have a right to be mad about if anger is one of the things that might tip people off as a warning sign about suicide?
I'll jump in. I think really it goes with what you know about the person. So typically, it's behavior that's now different from what we're used to seeing. So, as you mentioned, yes, we have reason to be angry, but if a person, the way they normally react to situations that make them angry, is one way, but now we see this high level of aggression. We see perhaps even reaching, trying to hurt themselves or other people, becoming more violent in the way that they demonstrate their anger. Those would be ways that and things that we want to take a look at, because that's telling us that something more is potentially going on.
So there's a difference in the degree or the expression of the anger for that person. Miss Amber, you were nodding. I don't know if you wanted to get in on that one.
No, yeah, no, I was just, that was a great point. I was nodding because I completely agree with her. I think that, I'm sorry, Miss Lita. I think that, I think it's a lot of like where the anger is placed. So, for example, if I come home and normally I'm someone who comes home, does the dishes, makes dinner, cleans the house, and then gets everything ready for bed. Well, if that's my normal day to day, and typically my family or friends are used to seeing me, um, you know, eager to do those things, or feeling better when I complete those tasks, but then on a random Thursday I'm just going off the map about, oh, these dishes are dirty, or oh, well, I have to cook dinner tonight, and it just seems unusual in comparison to how I normally behave. I think that that's what Miss Lita was getting at, and I completely agree. I think that that behavior change, that drastic change in the behaviors for someone, can definitely um, be a note to say that this is something they're experiencing. This is a warning sign. This is something we need to pay more closer attention to.
Okay, that's actually very helpful. Thank you. I want to transition now and talk a little bit about, if you're noticing some of these signs, what do you do with that? Okay, and maybe Miss Leslie, I'll open with you if it's okay. If a person seems troubled, what questions might be safe to ask in trying to engage them?
You can tell them that, ask them if they wanted to talk to you, because you're here from them. You're here from them. You are here for them if they need somebody to talk to. Because sometimes you just need to know that somebody cares and somebody wants to be there and listen to you.
Yeah, I think you make a really excellent point about decreasing someone's feeling of isolation. Sometimes it can be just enough to let someone know that you're in the space with them, that you're willing to share space with them. Miss Lita, help us out here. What are some other things?
I remember when I was first receiving training on just crisis management, and one of the things that we learned was to be direct with people, to ask them specific, direct questions. And that was so hard initially, because you think that you're going to somehow push them further into this place. But to ask them directly, are you thinking about harming yourself? To be very direct in your conversation, and then state to them, I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about your safety. I'm concerned about where you seem to be right now mentally. Having those direct, candid conversations are very key and very important.
All right, thank you, Miss Leslie. Absolutely, being direct with people and asking the tough questions. But what if my inclination is to not do that sort of thing, or I don't want to scare the person or offend them? Miss Amber, what do I do? Where do I go with that?
I, in my experience, have paid attention to cues. So if I notice again, and I keep going back to that because I think it's very important. If I'm working with someone, if I'm working with someone day in and day out, and I'm specifically speaking to case management, but if I'm working with someone and we're discussing, things that are going on in their life, it's very important for me to pay attention to those cues. So calling out noticeably things are noticeably changing. Hey, I noticed that you missed 2 appointments. Well, what's going on? Because now we've built that rapport. Now you trust me. So these are conversations, back to what Ms. Lita was saying, these are conversations that I can have. But to kind of go off what you were saying, if that's not your approach, if that's just not something you're comfortable with, I think it's creating that space to allow the person to be emotionally available in that sense. So, not necessarily going straight in for the going straight in for it, but creating a space where they can say, okay, I see that you're concerned. I see that I haven't had anybody who cares about me. I'm tired. I haven't had anybody who wants to listen to me. You're the only person that called me this week. So I'm going to go ahead and tell you what's going on.
Yeah, I like that. It also seems to me like it may be easier to have a conversation with someone about what it is that you're observing in terms of their behavior, as opposed to making assumptions about how it is that they may be feeling too. So we're sort of paying attention to the language that they're using. I love what's been said about that, but also kind of paying attention to what it is that they're doing. Miss Leslie, I think you maybe want to get in there on that one.
Sometimes it's always nice just to do a random check-in. I know I text a lot of my friends like, hey, how are you doing? You're on my mind. I was thinking about you. So sometimes they'll open up to you because they see that you care just by that text message that you sent them or that phone call that you made to them.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, we're getting into prevention just by talking about warning signs, and I appreciate that point greatly. I'll open this one up to whoever might like to take it, because we are Black psychiatry, and we want to talk about understanding mental health and mental health diagnoses as well. Can someone help our audience understand or have a better idea about some of the diagnoses that might be associated with suicidal thoughts? Whoever would like to.
I'll go ahead and hop in. I've noticed that a lot of it is typically depression and anxiety, and which those two go hand in hand. Usually, if you're anxious, you're depressed because you're anxious, or if you're depressed, you typically develop some sort of anxiety because you're feeling the way you're feeling. Also, others that I've noticed too is like PTSD. So people who've been in war or who have really gone through some truly traumatic experiences and just not really knowing how to process those events, or really how they're feeling emotionally, sometimes can lead to that. And schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a big one I've seen, because a lot of the time individuals, when we're speaking of schizophrenia, we're speaking of auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations. So those things sometimes can make you feel very dissociated. And when you're experiencing those things, and you begin to feel helpless and hopeless and not really knowing why this is happening to you or what can really be done about it. So in my experience, that's what I've come across.
Yeah, absolutely. Other thoughts on this? Diagnoses or yeah, please, Miss Lita.
I'm 100% agree, and one of the things that I've noticed, especially when a person gets a diagnosis of something like depression, for example, if they don't have some type of follow-up care with that, even the diagnosis itself can trigger these feelings of hopelessness, of helplessness. So that one seems to be very, very strong, especially when it's not handled the right way, or when people don't get the support they need when they receive a diagnosis like that.
Okay, I'm going to follow up with that question. What kind of support should we be offering to folks if they happen to get a diagnosis of something like depression or anxiety? Ms. Leslie, I'm coming right back to you because I want to ask you the same question, but I want to take this tangent real quick.
I'll just kind of continue that. Yeah. So when a person gets a diagnosis of depression, that can be very, very scary and overwhelming, especially, again, if we're talking about in the Black community. Many times people just weren't even talking about depression. So the type of support that we can offer is resources, whether that's therapy, whether that's group coaching, just even as a family and friends being willing to talk about, okay, this diagnosis doesn't mean that something is wrong with you. Let's talk about how you can work with this. Let's talk about resources, and let's talk about how you're actually feeling about even receiving a diagnosis like that. So I would say family support, friendship support, and again, having those open, honest conversations around how the person feels.
But girl, ain't nothing wrong with you. Right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about creating spaces, particularly in our community, that can sometimes be challenging if somebody doesn't even necessarily believe that your diagnosis is real. which can
Yeah.
further kind of add to, yeah, please, Amber, go.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say, when we're talking about those type of support groups, we're talking about creating or putting those individuals in communities where they don't feel isolated. So I don't feel like, oh, it's just me. I feel like, oh, I have 10 or 15 other, individuals who are not only of the same race, but also understand, understand exactly what I'm feeling, can relate, and now I don't feel so alone. So then that takes away that isolation piece, because now I can feel a part of something rather than feel like I'm kind of tossed aside. I think that is one of the most important things to me when we're speaking to it, just because, like you said, and the community is, girl, ain't nothing wrong with you. But in reality, there are things wrong with me. There's a lot of trauma that I've experienced that I haven't been taught how to process. So being in a room full of individuals who understand that, and we're able to kind of share dialogue about what it looks like, what it feels like, it allows for a greater chance of a greater chance of success overall when we're talking about treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Miss Leslie, let me bring you back on in to this conversation about diagnosis, but also maybe how to create spaces for self-love.
Yeah, I'm actually just started my self-love community called Brown Girls Embrace. It's about women embracing themselves and each other with mental health. I personally have anxiety and depression, so I wanted to create a support group for people like me who are comfortable to share their struggles with mental health, because I've dealt with it, my father's dealt with it, and I know we need support and we need help, and not everybody can understand what we're going through. So it's about being there for each other and supporting each other, and people feeling comfortable to express themselves and give each other tips about what they're going through and how they can help each other.
How important, Miss Leslie, I'm gonna keep on you for just one second. How important is it, do you think, to be around other folks that have a similar diagnosis or a similar experience? What does that do for people?
It makes you feel more comfortable. From my personal experience, the more I found out somebody was dealing with it, the more I could talk to them about how I was feeling when it came to my depression and when it came to my anxiety, or even when it came to the loss of my father. So having people around in your life who support you and who understand what you're talking about is so important.
Okay, so then maybe not everybody is going to be able to like create community perhaps in the same way as our panelists are. So what can we offer to folks who might struggle with kind of creating community on their own? Are there, I'm getting into the resources piece of it a little early, but I want to make sure we can offer folks some hope pretty early on. Please, Miss Leslie.
I know some people can't afford therapy or they don't have the time to go to therapy, but technology and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, we have all these motivational videos we can watch, or somebody that we can look at on Instagram, or some group we can be a part of that's free. So we're so thankful that we have a social media now where we can turn on a motivational video and make us feel more positive and more secure about what we're going through.
That's right. I love the use of technology. Obviously, we are able to come to folks today to talk about such an important topic. I want to transition now and start to talk about some of the language and some terms that people might hear when thinking about depression and anxiety. But before I do, I'm sorry, there was one other thought I had about diagnoses, because I want to make sure that we at least mention that alongside depression and anxiety, schizophrenia, which was mentioned, in PTSD, as well as the isolation that folks can experience, sometimes, particularly for men, but not exclusively by no stretch, the use of alcohol or other substances can play into someone who might make an attempt or begin to think about suicide. And so also evaluating one's relationship to alcohol and or drugs can be an important part of the process as well. Okay, so back to our conversation about terms and terminology. I'll start out with Miss Amber. What is a suicidal gesture?
That's a really great question. What is a suicidal gesture? Can you break that down for me? I want to make sure I answered correctly.
Yeah, or I'm going to open up to the rest of the panel, Miss Leah
Yeah.
or Miss Leslie.
Yeah.
Anybody? Wanna take this one? Nobody's gonna swing. I'll swing.
I don't think it's the gesture, but if a person is really quiet when they're normally the life of the party, or when they walk through the door, but all of a sudden they're quiet and they spend a few days just quiet into themselves. I've actually had a coworker. He was he was the outgoing person in the salon, but one day he came sick and he stopped talking. And the next day, my manager called me and told me he lost his life to suicide. So just seeing the change in his attitude and him being quiet, he wasn't himself. So that was a sign right there.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so suicidal gesture. I think when psychiatrists and maybe other mental health professionals talk about a suicidal gesture, they're talking about when someone has maybe taken an action or made a step toward making a step toward death by suicide. So for some people, that might look like taking medications in an attempt to overdose, or it might be hoarding pills or collecting pills in an effort to end their life or take their life. It could look like getting a belt in order to try to hang oneself, or even using a knife or other type of weapon or in order to harm oneself. And these kinds of things might be seen as gesturing toward or moving toward ending one's life. And so one of the, I think, sort of controversial, perhaps, or more challenging notions around the term gesture is that it could make it seem or suggest like the person does not really truly intend to end their own life in that moment, that they're only sort of making it seem as though they want to end their life. We sometimes hear people talk about a cry for attention or a cry for help. And those cries for attention or help might be seen as a suicidal gesture. But I think it's very important to recognize that even if someone only seems as though they are crying out for attention, that people's cries for attention can sometimes lead to death by suicide. So they should be taken seriously. And also, if someone is crying out for attention or crying out for help, it signals that there really is a need for some form of intervention, not judgment, not rejection, but rather assistance and help. So suicidal gesture, I think, is a thing that we're all still kind of coming to terms with as a way of understanding people's behavior, particularly as it relates to self-harm. Okay, thanks, y'all. I'm going to keep going and open up to the entire panel this one, and I'll start with you, Miss Leslie. How can you show someone you care if you're worried about their mental health?
Like I said before, you can always assure them that you're here. If you ever want somebody to talk to, or just say you want to go out for lunch, or you don't have to talk. We just want to go out or take a walk, or just be there for them. Sometimes people just need you to be there to listen to them, not offer them any advice. They just want you to be there and have company.
I'm going to piggyback on that, Miss Leslie. What's up with people always giving advice when you're coming to them for support? How do we respond to that when somebody says like, "Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. When that happened to me," and they like hijack your situation? Like, what do we do? Because I personally feel shut down in those moments, and those may be the moments when I absolutely need to show up even more. Miss Leslie, what do I do?
When somebody says, "I know how you're feeling,"
or when they sort of do the thing like, I know just how you feel, because when that happened to me, and then they tell you about what's going on with them.
Oh, I was like, well, you don't care. I would think you don't care about my situation. You care more about yours, and you're not helping me. You want me to listen to you, but I need you to listen to me.
So you just got to show up and be your authentic self and say, listen, I'm going to hijack. You just tried to hijack this story. I'm going to hijack it back.
Exactly.
So to the audience out there, it's okay to hijack your story back. If you are in a space where you are reaching out to someone and you need to talk about what's going on with you and somebody hijacks your story, hijack it back. Go, Miss Lita. You getting in there.
I love this so much because especially, and again, in our community, right? We have so many strong Black people, Black women, especially. And what I find that happens a lot of times is when a person who appears to be the strong Black woman handling business is now depressed or talks about feeling depressed, it's very, very difficult for people in that person's circle to even understand that they really are depressed. And so you see that type of dynamic in the conversation. It's, oh, I understand how you feel. Well, it's just like when I went through such and such. And the person is so used to being the strong person that it's easy for them to switch right into, okay, well, how can I help you? How can I make sure you're good? So I think it's awesome that we're talking about that because people need to really feel like they have permission to, like you said, you know what, I really can't help you right now. I need support. And just being mindful when you're talking to people and you notice something, because I think they have good intention. I think the friends and loved ones, they think they're helping and they're going in because they see something's wrong, but they're so used to this person's role being the strong one that it just automatically switches. So just be mindful of that. Like we tell kids, sit on your hands. Fight the urge to feel like you want to jump in and be like, I can relate because this happened to me, because you're really taking the power away from the person who needs your help right now.
Absolutely. Miss Amber, can I get you in on this part of the conversation?
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and say the them you're referring to was me. Okay. I was them. I definitely have done that and not intentionally, like having good intentions, wanting the caring and really wanting to know, but just being like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened to me. And now all of a sudden I'm all in because I also struggle with anxiety and depression. So, that's that anxiousness kicking in like, oh, let me just hurry up and just say this and do this. And yeah. And so what I've learned to do is sit back and ask myself, what are three main things that they've said to me and how can I help? So it allows me to kind of sit back and stop processing where I am and listen to where they are and what they're needing, because we all have something to bring to the table. We all have something to offer. So it's very important that if you have an individual who's not really used to coming out and being, strong enough, or not even necessarily strong enough, but just feeling confident and comfortable enough to express those types of things, because it's challenging. It's important to sit back and, like I said, I ask myself those questions. What are three things that they've said to me, and what can I do to help?
Okay, so three main things. Whew, that's gonna be it. Okay. That's our challenge. That's one of the things we're gonna take away from this. The three main things. I'm gonna try to practice that, put that into practice myself. You all mentioned, Ms. Lee, you mentioned something about being a strong Black woman. And I know that this is a whole other panel, probably one that y'all kick me out of, but I just want somebody, because it came up, if you can just speak about that, because I get so concerned that underneath the strength, the outward portrayal of strength that is thrust upon Black women, there's a lot of deep pain and depression and anxiety and sadness that can sort of lead to these suicidal thoughts that sometimes folks struggle with. So can somebody just talk about that for me? Yeah, Ms. Lita, go.
Sure. So again, many of us who are in this work, in this field, is because we've experienced a lot of it ourselves. And much like what Amber mentioned, that I've always talked about my own journey with depression and being that go-to person. And you're absolutely right. I remember one time someone said to me, "You're always fine and you're always happy, and then all of a sudden you're depressed and you want to harm yourself." And so what they don't realize is that it's not that it comes up all of a sudden. You're just constantly burying it down, trying to be there for everyone else, trying to be strong, trying to be, Miss Positive or Miss Powerful. And you're not able to really help yourself with those things that are hurting you. So I am a big, big advocate, especially for our women out there who feel this way. Find the spaces and the people that you can be transparent, you can be authentic, and you can say, I need help. I'm sad, I'm hurting, I'm in pain, I'm not over this thing that happened to me. Be able to talk about that in the right spaces, because eventually it does catch up with you. You can only run from it and hide but so long, and it will catch up with you.
Absolutely. There's strength in vulnerability and transparency. There's strength in that. Miss Leslie, go.
I know a lot of times, a lot of African American women, we want to come off as we're perfect. We have it all together. But deep down inside, we are going delusional, going crazy because we didn't get that mental health that we needed to get. So we want to perceive that we're perfect. We got the perfect car, we got the perfect house, but you're trying to please everybody, but you're dying inside because you don't want people to think that you're not perfect. And it's okay if you have mental health and then go get therapy, but sometimes you got to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. So that's all I wanted to say.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. I mean, there's so much pressure, I think, especially now, for us to present a certain way. We always, I mean, as we've talked about technology, we've talked about social media, and there is a sort of a double-edged sword to it, I think, as well, where people represent themselves a certain way online that is just really not necessarily consistent with what you may know about them behind the scenes. And so I think what we want to try to promote here is that there is really strength in your authenticity. That the way to be your strongest version of yourself, strong Black woman, is to be your most authentic version of yourself, and that comes with vulnerability and transparency, and sometimes letting people know that you're having struggles too. Okay, I want to open this question now to Miss Leslie. Suicide was a leading cause of death in ages 10 through 34 in 2019. Studies have noted an increase in suicide rates, specifically in Black youth. Help us understand what's going on and maybe what some of those reasons are.
A lot of it is from kids going to school and being bullied, people making fun of them, saying that they're less of a person. So a lot of it starts at school, and they have their own insecurities on their own anyway. And then to add to that, they're being bullied every day at school.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, so bullying, and I'm assuming you're talking about like all kinds of bullying as well, the different types of bullying. Yeah, Miss Lita, any other thoughts that you might have about what may be going on with Black youth and increasing suicide?
Absolutely. Again, as you mentioned earlier, social media, like anything, it can be amazing resource and tool, but it can also be very harmful. And when you imagine these young people everywhere they go, whether it's being mistreated at school, then on social media, they can be mistreated, bullied, harassed. But then also let's think about what's just going on in the world itself, right? With the hatred towards our community, and especially Black males. So you can just imagine that these young people, where do they go? Where can they look to see something positive or to even talk about it? Because, and we mentioned earlier about anger, everyone is so angry, everyone is so frustrated. So many of these young people, they have nowhere to go to tell them that it's going to be okay, to even validate their fears and their emotions. And so when a person feels helpless and hopeless, many times that's when we see that death by suicide.
Yeah, thank you, Miss Lita. Miss Amber, I want you to come in on this one because you mentioned very early on that sometimes people don't have the language to even really express themselves. And I see that as being a contributing factor to why it is that our youth struggle so much. Other thoughts that you might have about why it is that Black youth have been experiencing this increase in suicide recently?
Yeah, of course. I think it's not really having a lot of knowledge about what it feels like, what it looks like, and then when you do, not having a proper outlet. So, in my opinion, a lot of it starts at home. I believe in being very transparent with my 6-year-old daughter. I believe in making sure she's very aware of things. And I do this because I don't want her to ever feel like she lacks the knowledge behind what's going on in the world. Also, to kind of speak to what Miss Lita was saying, that's kind of the whole purpose of my platform, Mindful Media, is just being aware and being mindful of the things that you are exposing yourself to. The media is just, it's everywhere. And it's really hard or challenging rather to kind of deviate away from it. And I feel like as the years have gone on, social media is just kind of that grounds for the youth. This is where they're talking to people or seeing things that maybe they aren't really prepared to be exposed to. And so then you have where you have the death by suicide, it's raising, and it's very challenging to try and grab a hold of it. So my thing is just, be mindful and just monitor that media exposure, because not all the time is everything on there necessarily what needs to be exposed at that time.
So our folks out there, parents, teachers, people that have relationships with youth, part of it, I think, is having that conversation, but also part of it, I think, is monitoring their use of social media, their access to technology is what I hear you saying, Ms. Amber. Is that right? Yeah.
That is correct. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, please, no.
Yeah. I think that it can get challenging too, though, because again, I mean, we're parents, we're also living in this world, and we're trying to make sure we're doing everything, and we're caring for our children and caring for ourselves. And so a lot of the times it's easier just to say, here, take my phone. I've done it. I'm guilty. I do it. But I've learned to become a little bit more mindful of it, because I understand what's associated with it. And not everything needs to necessarily be exposed to my 6-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, too, those breaks. I mean, yeah, you can watch YouTube. Yeah, you can take the phone for a little while, but let's only do this for 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day or what have you, whatever's appropriate, deeming your household, but just understanding that has a lot to do with it.
Miss Leslie.
I think a lot of parents nowadays do have to explain to their children that everything you see on social media isn't real. I know we look at it and it can seem glamorous, or they have it together and I want to be like so-and-so and so-and-so. But that could be what they're showing you. They don't know the real deal. So we really have to explain to the younger people that everything you see on the internet isn't real life. And you can't model everything you see on the internet because it might not be real.
I absolutely agree with that. I think that one of the things I hear folks talk about a lot is like the comparison with what they see on social media, and a real feeling of like lack and deprivation. Like, why isn't my life like this? And I should be able to live my life like this, and I don't have access to it. And in fact, for so many, they don't have access to a lot of resources in schools or in their neighborhoods. And so if you're talking about like sort of a more widespread lack of access to resources because of poverty or of living on sort of the margin, that absolutely is going to play into why it is that people, especially our youth, are so angry. Miss Lita, I interrupted, but I want to bring you back in.
Oh, sure. No, I was just going to say that this is also an opportunity for parents or guardians to really take a look at themselves and how they handle the things that are going on in their own emotions. Because, again, let's remember that young people are going to imitate their parents and those that they're looking to, right? So when these things are happening in the world, and the fears and the hatred and the anxiety in the world, if the child is seeing, mom or dad handling it in a way that seems out of control or giving in to certain emotions and things like that, that's going to create that same sense of uncertainty in the child. So many people that I've talked to, recently have said this is something that's actually encouraged them to get the help they need, because they see that their child is now imitating them, imitating their emotions and behavior. Sometimes the child doesn't even really understand what's going on. They're just imitating the parent. So just wanted to add that's another thing that we can do to help support our young people, make sure that we are okay and we're handling things in an appropriate way. And then that way we can be steady for the young people.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I worry about our youth, of course. It seems like the pressures that are on them are just so much greater than what I felt like I experienced even as a kid growing up. And one of the we don't talk so much about like the academic stresses that they might experience, like what's it like to be in school, because that was, probably the major thing that we kind of talked about back in the day. But now it's like all of this other stuff and the bullying and the cyberbullying and social media and the expectations that are placed upon them, and really seeing a kind of lifestyle that many folks just don't and never will have access to, just because of the way that the Instagrams and the social medias of the world work.
Yeah, and the virtual learning. I mean, that's such a huge thing now. I know I have I have tons of nieces and nephews, but the ones that I am really close to, they've said to me like, Auntie, I want to go to school. Like, I want to go to school. I want to be around my friends. I want to go outside. I want to pack my lunch. The simple things that we used to do that maybe we didn't feel like doing the night before to prepare for the next day, but those little things are enough to cause anxiety and to initiate depression, and a lot of the other diagnoses we've discussed.
Yeah, for sure. I think we've seen a great disruption in the lives of youth as a result of COVID, which has just been a whole other thing. Miss Leslie.
I also was thinking about when people join sororities, they want to fit in so bad and be a part of the sorority. They'll do anything, and they may not realize that they might be pushing them too hard, and that could cause, negative thoughts to have. And even these challenges on TikTok, or you doing something dangerous because you want so many numbers and views. So they do all these outrageous activities to be liked by their people their age.
Yeah, I was talking with some colleagues a couple of days ago. We were talking about the tremendous sense of belonging and how important it is to belong. Like, we want to belong so much to groups. We identify so strongly with groups at the same time that we are also trying to stand in our individuality. And so we can get really caught up in, well, who am I trying to be right now in this moment? In this moment, I am one among many, and that complication for folks can absolutely increase feelings of anxiety, disconnection, isolation, and lead to further depression. Okay. What does suicide prevention look like in vulnerable communities, in your community? What does suicide prevention look like? Ms. Leslie, I'm going to open with you.
So is the question, what does it look like for somebody to be vulnerable with you?
What does suicide prevention look like when practicing how to help prevent suicide in communities, with folks that you're working with?
Just like I said, just to be there for them, to show them support, to say, hey, I got you. If you need somebody to talk to, I'm here for you. Just to give them like some little self-love activities, or quote, hey, I saw this about you. You're beautiful. You're worthy. Keep going. Like, there's so many quotes we can send to people, and there's so many Pinterest positive activities or self-love challenges we can send to each other, or motivational videos. So just using your resources and being there for somebody is needed and helpful as well.
Okay, great. Miss Lita.
Yes, I agree. And I go back to the candid, open, transparent conversations. We talked about it earlier. When you're talking to someone, be willing to ask the questions. Ask, what do you need from me? How can I help you? Do you want me to just listen right now? Are you looking for some feedback? Those are very specific things that you can do to help someone who may be in distress. And then if you see these things continuing to increase their behavior, or things that are giving you really strong warning signs, you increase your level of transparency, and you express to them that you are concerned, and you continue following up with them, and you let them know, I'm going to be following up with you. And of course, if it goes to a point where you are very, very certain that this is something that they are planning, then if you're not equipped to handle that, then you reach out for additional resources with people who are trained to know how to help someone who is planning to die by suicide.
So what I love about what you're saying just now is, and then I'm going to get to you, Ms. Amber, but what I love about what you're saying is that it does begin with the individual. Like, I think when so often we talk about like systems and clinics and doctors, like all these other people have to be involved in suicide prevention. And that's not to suggest that they don't, but suicide prevention can begin with the one-on-one connection that Ms. Leslie talked about, being there for someone, encouraging self-care, and then sort of showing up for folks like you talk about, Ms. Lita. Ms. Amber, is there anything you want to add about suicide prevention, particularly from your standpoint from as a case manager? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Miss Lita and Miss Leslie definitely hit on the big ones. But um, in my field, I've done wellness checks. So a lot of, you're not answering my phone calls, you're sending me the voicemail. Well, I'm gonna come stop by and make sure you've eaten today, and make sure you've had your food stamps came through, or that application we were talking about. Let's make sure we fill that out. So kind of giving them that sense of empowerment over their lives, and taking away that hopeless feeling by just showing up and being present, and deviating away from this kind of cloud of what next.
I just have to jump in here really quickly, if you don't mind. Black psychiatry, they are our panelists. So I think that I want to, and Amber was getting into it, and I'm just going to take it up a notch just a little bit, because I think about what people think that suicide prevention is like crisis intervention when someone is in that crisis right in that moment, or the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, which please believe me, is a great resource, and it's helped me get to see patients who were afraid to come into the ED where I work, to the emergency department or emergency room, and they have told them to come in. So that is truly what suicide prevention looks like in that moment. But suicide prevention really also looks like affordable housing. It looks like food security. It looks like affordable health care. So as Amber was alluding to, like, did you eat today? Did you get your food stamps? Did you get this housing application? Because I think that people fail to realize this lack of stability, this instability, this insecurity makes people who I work with in our community say, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I have nowhere to live. I don't know if my children are going to be able to eat. So when you have to think about that and that's on your mind constantly, suicide prevention actually is a little bit more. And I know Dr. Darrell said it's not systems, but I'm a systems person. So it is the system also. It's the system which is made up of individuals, but it is the system and how we destigmatize mental illness, how we get people help, how we act as a community. So when we strengthen community partnerships, when we actually have acceptance of people, if someone is saying that I have a mental illness, if someone is saying that I'm part of the LGBTQIA community and family, your families accepting that and not making you feel ostracized or isolated. So there are so many things that we have to think about for suicide prevention, which just can't be in that moment, oh, call 911. Because yes, do call 911, because I'm going to be sitting there, I'm going to be waiting for you. That's my job. I want to be in the ED, come on down. But what is it on a broader scope that people need the help with? People are being harmed by the trauma, by not having that community feel, by not having community engagement activities, by not having talks about youth suicide prevention, by not having something for people to do, something for people to look forward to, something for people to care about. So let me go back behind the scenes, but
don't leave just yet. Don't leave just yet, because I agree 1,000% with everything you said, and I want to make sure I'm clear that I'm not trying to say the systems are not important. I think that there are levels to this thing. Of course, I think that if we're talking about suicide prevention, we begin with the individual, and it has to begin with the individual, because what you may be talking about with someone is safety planning. You may be talking about reducing their access to certain weapons. You may be talking about removing medications from them so that they don't have access. That you may be talking about reducing their alcohol consumption, encouraging them to use their medications, and taking and making sure that they see their providers. All of that, that's all like individual. That's stuff that somebody can do kind of perhaps in isolation, right? Not really, but you see what I mean, right? And then you go to the interpersonal, like what takes place in that conversation between two people or more, where someone is having that back and forth. And then of course we go to like, what is it that you're doing at a systems level? What are we doing at a national level, and so forth? And and always, of course, like this is suicide prevention. This conversation is suicide prevention. And so thank you, Dr. Hairston, for getting in here.
You're welcome. Yes, all of this is suicide prevention. Everything that everyone on this panel does on a day-to-day basis is suicide prevention. And it might not be something that is identified as suicide prevention, but everything that you're doing to combat things and to support people, whether it's suicide, whether it's through social media posts, whether it's on Lita's YouTube, whatever it is, whether it's Brown Girls Embrace, whether it's when Dr. Shorter and I see patients on a daily basis and check in with them, whether it's Amber giving the warnings about how, social media, which I love social media, but how social media can be harmful. It's something on a daily basis. It's not just in that moment. And I think that's important for people to understand, especially in our communities. When we think that, suicide is just something that white people do, but this suicide is something that can build up, and these thoughts and ideations can be building up for some time. And I think that a lot of times we hear people say, well, you seemed happy, or that celebrity seemed happy, like they didn't seem like they were depressed. I can't believe that, but you never know what was going on with them. So suicide prevention might be parenting classes, people who don't know how to be supportive. Like Amber said, it might be learning how to just listen, like listen. I have to listen to people all day. So when I get home, sometimes I don't want to hear anything, but I'm going to follow what Amber said also, like taking 3 things, like let me hold on for 3 things that they were talking about. Because that support, and now us knowing that these skills are important, are suicide prevention in the long term, on the long end, the long way, is how we are not just suicide prevention in that critical crisis, acute moment, which I'm still there for you. I'm going to be right there in the emergency room, in the ICU. I'm going to come up there. But it's more than just that in that quick crisis moment.
I think what's also so important about what you're saying is that it loops everybody into participating in suicide prevention. It blows the doors off this idea that you have to be on the other side of a hotline, phone, or text thing. You have to be a provider in order to participate in suicide prevention. That we are all sort of our brothers, sisters, and others' keeper. Right? Like we are all taking care of one another, and part of my response. So I guess my challenge to the viewer then is this challenge of like, well, what are you doing to help prevent suicide today in your immediate sphere and also more broadly? And perhaps that's the challenge that we should take away from this conversation. How can I be more actively involved in suicide prevention here and here?
Yes, Dr. Darrell, summarizing it up, bringing it all together as usual, as per usual. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all our panelists for being here. And I just want to really shout out our panelists, because they have been preparing for this for all month. And if you didn't see them last week, it was my fault. It was our production issue back here, but we really wanted to get Dr. Darrell on the scene, and we really wanted to have Miss Lita here also. So I'm glad that it all worked out, and so that Miss Leslie, Amber, and we could all be here and really talk about how we can help our communities and what we need to do. So again, if you are in DC and you're a DC resident, or you are a healthcare worker in the city, anywhere in this country, period, and you need help, you can email us right down there at howardrrproject@gmail.com. Again, thank you to all of you who have participated thus far in the surveys that helped us get some more funding. We are going to change a little bit for 2022. The how we bring you content, and we're going to try to get some credits in there for, those social workers and CME credits that we need to keep our licenses. So we are working on that for 2022. But thank you all for being here. And also follow us on the Instagrams, follow us on the socials. If you don't know how to find us, it's at Black Psychiatry on Instagram and Twitter. Nice and simple for you. I'm a doc named Danny on Instagram and Twitter, and know that I say whatever I want, especially on the Twitter. So just be prepared. And also, let me just say, the institution and the group that raised me, the Black Psychiatrists of America, we are coming up with a conference. I know that we have had some loss and some changes, but we are going to be back with a conference coming up. So look out for some details about that. I will post that on at Black Psychiatry as well. So that's exciting. And if you didn't know, I also have a podcast, which anyone, please, y'all are all welcome to join. I have a podcast called The Next 72 Hours. It is on Google. It is on iTunes. It is on Apple Music. It is about racism, mental health, history, all the things. So please join us. Listen, if you want to be a guest, if you have a story that needs to be told, please email us. And again, the podcast is called The Next 72 Hours. I hope all my panelists will consider being guests, telling your stories. I am incredibly grateful that you are all here. I am getting ready to go on a much needed leave. So we are going to work on handing some content over to some other creators, and we are going to bring you content in a whole new way in 2022 again. So thank you to all our panelists. Thank you to these lovely ladies, and thank you to Dr. Shorter for always stepping up to support at Black Psychiatry, and me, a doc named Danny. So thank you again to our panelists. Let's really reframe the way we think about suicide prevention, and not just in the moment, but what we can do to support each other and our communities in the long run. Good night.